Hey guys, it's Iconic, and in this video we're going to be covering everything you need to know to play my pack leader minion build, which I have been playing basically since launch. This video is going to be broken into different sections and they're going to be timestamped below, so feel free to jump around as you see fit, but just keep in mind that every section is going to have key information about the build and the contents might not be necessarily restricted to the items of that section. So with that said, let's go into the first one, which is how does this build work. So starting off, what even is the build and how does it work? The build revolves around wolf minions, and these minions are summoned from two different gems, from Pounce and from Wolf Pack. With Pounce, you're going to apply a mark on an enemy, and this mark is going to be activated by killing the enemy or by hitting with both claw attacks with your cross/skill. After activating this mark, a wolf is summoned from the enemy. Now, if this enemy is a unique enemy, you're going to summon two wolves instead. Now, something important to note about Pounce is that the wolves summoned by the skills do not automatically respawn after death, and you're going to need to activate marks to resummon them essentially. So there's a bit of downtime there. Wolfpack, on the other hand, is a spirit gem, and that costs 60 spirits as a baseline, and it summons an amount of wolves which is set by the level of the gem combined with other factors. Now, these wolves are persistent minions, which means they automatically revive after a death timer, just like how skeletons and other persistent minions act. Now, who is this build for? As an enjoyer of the lazy minion playstyle, where I get to support my minions through the occasional buff and debuffing of enemies while my minions do all the heavy lifting, I initially thought that I would hate the playstyle around wolf form because of how much active gameplay and, like, you know, melee there is in the build. But to their credit, GGG actually did a really good job at making wolf skills just feel really fun to use. You're able to pounce around the battlefield, applying buffs to your wolves and yourself in many different ways, and to my surprise, I ended up really liking the moment-to-moment combat for the wolf form. So if you're like me and you enjoy the lazy minion playstyle, I still think it's worth giving a try, even if it seems like it's not for you initially. Now, if you're an enjoyer of more active playstyles, you're just going to love this essentially. And if you do not like minions, then you might not like this because of the whole Pounce minions having to be resummoned and that leading to damage downtime, whatever. So you might be wondering what the Oracle brings to the table and why we picked the Ascendancy over all the other plethora of options we have, like the Shaman and basically all Witch Ascendancies. The first and the biggest reason to go Oracle is just the Unseen Path Ascendancy. That Ascendancy I found insanely cool when I first saw it, and what it essentially does is it adds new nodes to the tree while simultaneously giving you extra passive points on the small node leading up to it, which effectively means you have options on the tree that other classes just don't have access to. Oracle also has a second node called Entwined Realities, and this one makes it so whenever you pick a keystone, you get to select any points within a certain radius around that keystone, and this makes it so you get to cut out a lot of the inefficient pathing if you don't need some travel nodes, and that makes it so your trees look very, very interesting and very different from other ascendancies. And it also leaves a lot of space for build crafting, so I really enjoy this ascendancy overall and the concept around it. For our third ascendancy, we're going to be picking up the lesser harm notable on the tree, which is very straightforward. Whenever an enemy hits us, they're going to roll their damage number twice, and the lower number is going to be chosen, giving us some survivability increase. And the same concept is going to be applied to their crit chance that it rolls twice, and then the lower number, if one of them is not a crit, then we don't get crits. Pretty straightforward, and it's pretty strong defensive layer. And then for the last ascendancy, we opt for the Harmony Within node. The Harmony Within node is the node that allows us to take hits damage from mana before life if your current mana is higher than your life. This effectively means whenever your current life drops to below whatever your current mana is, i.e. if you have 500 life and you have 1,000 mana, the next sources of hit damage will be taken from your mana so long as that number stays higher than your life. So why is this insanely strong? This node is a very strong one because it utilizes your mana pool as a life resource and as a resource that enemies have to eat through before you actually die. But it comes with some serious downsides. The downsides on this ascendancy include 15% less maximum life and less maximum mana. This effectively makes us tankier to many smaller hits because it keeps juggling between life and mana and allows us to use our potions to sustain backup. But it reduces our maximum hit, which is the amount of damage we can take from full life and mana without dying. To compensate for the max hit loss that we are suffering, we're going to be running some sources of damages taken from mana before life. Why do we do this? Being able to redirect some damage from life to mana only matters when our life is higher than our mana to begin with, thanks to the Ascendancy. So this effectively increases our maximum hits, because now whenever you would be one shot by, because the hit would only take from life, you are able to utilize some of your mana still as a defensive layer regardless. So this helps us to massively mitigate the impact of the less life as a downside, while also being able to benefit from the upside of having the Ascendancy as a whole. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel out a lot. Now, before we get too deep into PoBs, I will say PoB has been very finicky when it comes to exporting and importing PoB since League launch, simply because of how much changed in the game and in the tree and all those files. So I've been having issues trying to get viewers to actually be able to see the tree, and I think I finally found a solution to this. But I'm going to be showing you how to import my build codes should the PoE.ninja link not work, using the raw build codes towards the side. And eventually, hopefully, PoB.in is going to be up and running, and we can export to it, or even Maxroll as an alternative. So how do we do that? We're going to be using the build code, like I said, at the extreme. It's a long code. All you're going to do is you're going to put your cursor over the node. You're going to copy it, Ctrl+C, and then you're going to go into PoB. Make sure you're on version 0.14.0. If you are not, you would want to check for update and update your PoB too. Also, make sure you're on PoB too. I forgot to mention that. You're going to hit new. You're going to hit import. You're going to paste the code we just copied here. You're going to say the code is valid, and you're going to import a new build. Now you're going to have the exact same PoBs I have listed in the following sections, and you're going to be able to save those, use those however you see fit, yada yada. That is how we go about doing that if the PoE.ninja links do not work. So for this build, I have made 3 different PoBs: the leveling, the low budget, and the high budget. Why there is no medium budget is basically the low budget to unless you go from the low budget to the high budget, it's basically the same thing. The only thing you're doing is getting better gear, better bases with more mods or more affixes on those gear pieces that actually apply to you. You're leveling up and getting more of those points. That is the biggest difference between the low budget and the high budget, which is why there's no actual mid budget. Just keep that in mind. So going to the leveling section, first and foremost, there is a note section that explains this gear, the skill gem progression, and when you should switch to what skill gem, when you should be on 30 points, when you should be on 60, when you should be on 90, and so on and so forth. And as for the tree section, to follow along, you're going to want to selectively increase the tree as you get points. So whenever you get more points than the tree has, you're going to want to go to the next one, 45 points and 60 points, and so on and so forth. So to briefly touch on the skill section, we're going to be using our pounce as our only source of wolves until we're able to fit in wolf pack in Act 3. But before then, they're not going to be doing a lot of damage in terms of our minions because of the nature of our first tree. We don't have access to that much in the way of minion stats yet. We have some damage here, some attack speed, some damage, all of that, but it's not going to carry the poor base stats that wolves have in Act 1 and at those really lower gem levels. When you start scaling the levels of pounce and whatnot, this gets massively better, but just know Act 1, they're going to be more fluff than anything. And for your actual damaging abilities to go through Act 1 and potentially Act 2, you can utilize Volcano and Rolling Magma, which is what I did for a good chunk of Act 1. I think as of Andrea's Mana, I unspec'd Rolling Magma for the most part and started going mostly Lunar Assault. But we're going to be using Lunar Assault as our main DPS if you want to, and if you don't, you can still do the same thing, Rolling Magma. Lunar Assault is going to be a good source of extra damage as well, because whenever you freeze, you're going to proc Ice Bite 1, which just gives you damage as extra code on all your abilities. Arctic Howl is going to act as an empower skill for your Lunar Assault, as well as for buffing whatever wolves you have up. Again, the damage is supplementary, we're not relying on it. but it still adds up in single target fight, so why not? And we'll be using Pounce and Ravenous Swarm. Ravenous Swarm's job here is just to shred armor for your Pounce wolves, for yourself, and they're just supplementary, and the poison does damage as well, so why not? You have nothing else to use with the 30 spirit you get in Act 1, so it's a no-brainer to use it. And then we go on to Act 3-ish. For Act 3, which is the second skill set, you now have your Ignagdok spirit points, so you have 60 spirits total, and you're able to use Wolfpack finally. Now that you can use Wolfpack, you're going to be relying more on your minions. You are going to be doing a lot of damage personally in this setup, but your minions are now going to start ramping by Act 3. You now have access to like 8 wolves or 9, 10, depending on where you are in the tree. It's going to start feeling really nice to have wolves. You're not going to have to kill every single mob on your screen. This is where it really starts ramping, and by 90 points, it's very straightforward. You're going to be using, you're going to have way more rules. You're going to have Ravenous Swarm because you have your last set of spirit points, all of that good stuff. So that's how the leveling of this PoB essentially works. And something to keep in mind is, even though I do not pick up stuff like Expendable Army in this 60-point setup, if you do eventually get your second Ascendancy earlier than this PoB would have you believe, then I do recommend picking up nodes like that via taking the Ancestral Bond keystone, as well as like other sources we do in the 75.3. Just keep that in mind. Now moving on to the low budget. This is going to be the bread and butter, because this is actually where you're going to spend a good majority of your time playing this build, because the switch up from low budget to high budget is a lot of currency, and that currency is basically spent trying to fit in a Sceptre into this setup. A Sceptre is going to be a lot of, the way I explain it is, the Sceptre is a lot higher potential damage you're going to do. Your maximum damages are going to be higher. However, if you opt for going for the Sceptre before you fix your rage regen, i.e. via Eternal Rage, what is going to happen is your average experience while you're clearing the map and doing content is going to be overall worse. Your quality of life is going to be a lot worse, because now, even though you have access to more damage because there's like 4+4 levels on the Sceptre, you have more minions, yada yada. Because you're missing that rage regen, you're going to have to manually generate it via your attacks and whatnot. And this effectively means that between packs while you're clearing the map, you're going to be losing rage. Your ultimate also eats all the rage you have to extend its duration. So you're going to not want to just launch it at the start of a pack. You're going to want to build up rage and then launch it. But then by the time you're launching it, the pack is practically dead. And now you're losing rage before you get to the next one, before you can finally use it again. And all this time, you don't have the damage boost coming from your ultimate. Your Warcry isn't freezing as much. There's lots of quality of life nerfs by going for the Sceptre before Eternal Rage. It is up to you, but ultimately I recommend using the Eternal Rage first, and that is what we do in this panel. Anyways, all that out of the way, I'm not going to talk too much about the tree. The TLDR is we're going to be scaling armor as our defensive layer. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using damage taken from Mana Before Life as a defensive layer as well. We're also getting some from here, and we have some recoup on mana from here. Those are all nice options, and then we're going to be scaling some life regeneration rate. So we're going to be picking up some here. We're going to be picking up some minion regen as their defenses, some minion chaos res, some minion physical damage reduction, some minion res. All of these things are all good notables. And if I had to recommend a wheel to get last, I would say your priority first is getting good damage, then you're improving your defenses. So, and then for your defenses, you're going to want more efficient nodes. So picking up this 1 point is very efficient because you're already in the area to pick up these 3 and whatnot. Also, getting your maximum moves to +4, your maximum pounce moves to +4 is also a very, very important thing to do. And then getting extra DR here is also a very nice defensive layer as well. So these are all things that you should consider doing as you're progressing. Now, to move on to the skill section, we're going to start it off by talking about Pounce and how awkward it is to scale with Wolfpack, because it is the topic that I think fascinates me the most, simply because I don't understand why they would make this decision. But the TLDR is you scale gems based on the tags they have. The tags are what ultimately determines what can support them and what affects them. Pounce is a melee skill, which means the minions from Pounce scale with melee skill levels. So because we are a wolf, we're going to be using a talisman. Talisman naturally rolls up to +7 to the level of all melee skills. Now this is a lot of damage for minions because the biggest damage skill on minions, it tends to be levels. Now, Wolfpack, which is your source of the second set of wolves, does not have melee tag. So all that level we just go from our talisman, null and void. Doesn't affect this even slightly. Which is kind of unfortunate. And why is that 34? I don't understand why. Anyways, that is kind of unfortunate. It is what it is. They designed it that way. But we're not done with the awkwardness, because Wolfpack has the companion tag. And because Wolfpack has a companion tag, it gets to scale with modifiers like the rallying form node, which says companions in your presence have onslaught while you are shapeshifted. So while we are wolf, they have onslaught. So those Wolfpack wolves, they have extra attack cast speed for free and move speed, but our Pounce wolves don't. So I don't know why they decided to go with this route of giving some tags to one and not tag and leaving some the other. I don't know, but this effectively means that your Pounce wolves are going to be on average like 9 levels higher than your Wolfpack wolves, which is a lot of damage difference. But it's then, you know, whatever. It is what it is. Ultimately, they all do good damage. Your Pounce wolves will just do better damage if they have the same skill gems, is all that means. But 20 wolves is better than 11. Well, so for the skill gem section, we're going to be using Pounce with rapid attacks. This rapid attacks is doing 2 things. It's going to make it so Pounce feels better for us to use, but ultimately it's also going to make it so our wolves attack faster. Paired with Feeding Frenzy, so it gets more generic damage. And this build really loves generic damage on the minion skills, and the reason being is wolves baseline do physical damage, no conversion, all physical damage. However, thanks to Arctic Howl being supported by Batari's Vengeance, this is a support gem that makes it so when the supported skill freezes a target, for every rage you have, it snapshots, basically sticks a snapshot and gives all you and all allies in your presence that % of damage as extra code. So if you have 20 rage, it gives them 20%. It gives you and your wolves 20% of damage as extra code. If you have 80, we have a max of 85. So if you have 85, that gives you and your wolves 85% of damage as extra code. And this effectively means when paired with our ultimate, we are doing like 155% of damage as extra code. And that basically means we do more cold damage than physical damage because of when all those buffs are up. So this means it is smarter to scale the elemental damage from our minions than it is to scale the physical damage. So we're going for elemental armament and for cold penetration. But because of the nature of how we still do physical damage anyways, that is why we love generic damage. And then we could do minion mastery because it makes minions tankier, makes them do more damage, and it's the more damage is generic, so it helps both the physical and the cold. Wolfpack has the same things, essentially basically the same. Lunar Blessing is going to be very interesting. We are pairing Lunar Blessing with Olsen's Oath, and this makes it so Lunar Blessing is going to be a very, very big contributor to our mana sustain. This support gem essentially makes it so all mana leech done by the supported gem is based on elemental damage instead of physical damage. And because all of its damage is converted to elemental, i.e. cold, and it has a lot of damage as extra cold, this ends up doing a lot of damage and leeching us a lot of mana leech. However, the support gem has a mana leech category, so you can't actually give it a second mana leech gem. So that means you have to get mana leech on gear. And I personally prefer getting mana leech on your talisman. However, you can opt for mana leech on your gloves, all the same. Doesn't matter much. Actually, it does. If it's on your gloves, that takes a suffix away from like res and attributes. So I personally prefer going for talisman. And then we're just going to be prolonging this, like increasing its duration, reducing its cooldown, making sure the moonbeams are hitting, are proccing rage per attack, and then having it do a bit more damage with cold penetration. Something to keep in mind is the way moonbeams work and why we opt for this as our source of mana leech is once you have this form, regardless of the attack you as a player do, so long as you attack an enemy, you're going to have a moonbeam come down and do damage, which would then give you rage because it's a melee attack. To then leech mana. It does a lot. And because this is from any skill, you have the option of using Lunar Assault, your Pounce procs it. It's very, very good. And then Lunar Assault is your melee attack. You're going to be using this to generate freeze build up on enemies, while your clearing is going to be one hit freezing enemies. So that's going to be give you very good uptime on your Ice Bite, which is damages extra for yourself. It's also going to be your single most consistent source of rage, aside your Eternal Rage gem. And they're going to give you more freeze build up so it can proc this one more efficiently while you're clearing. And then Ancestral Call just helps you do everything better. It summons two entities, two ancestral spirits that repeat the attack with all your stats and everything. I don't know if the attacks count as yours. I haven't tested it yet. And I don't know if their freezes also would proc, everything your freeze does. I don't know if it procs Ice Bite, for example. But it's a very nice support to have. And it also gives you more damage whenever that attack is ancestrally boosted. So there's literally no downside. Then Arctic Howl, like I said, we have Batari's Vengeance. It's self-explanatory. We have Echoing Cry, so our war cry repeats 3 times. This makes it so whenever we are clearing and we're in a pack, we can just literally press our Arctic Howl. And so long as our minions are doing cold damage, there is going to be an enemy that is primed for freeze, and that will proc Arctic Howl's buff. I know, and to kind of explain what Arctic Howl does is whenever it hits an enemy that is primed for freeze or frozen, it gives you and your allies a bit of flat cold damage. It gives, with its quality, it gives allies increased freeze build up to help build up that freeze, and it also empowers one of your attacks to deal even more flat cold damage. It's a very good war cry. So paired with Echoing Cry, you just get to have it freeze enemies more because it's hitting, it gets to repeat for free without you pressing anything. And that, of course, would proc Batari's Vengeance. And then we have it paired with Enrage War Cry, which allows you to spend rage and just bypass its cooldown, so you don't even have to worry about a cooldown. Just keep in mind that Echoing Cry makes it so you have to travel a distance before you can repeat using the skill, before you can use skill again, rather. So when you proc it, if you see your skill is still grayed out or cannot be used, you probably just haven't moved that distance yet. Brittle Armor is also really good because whenever you freeze enemies, it is with the skill, it is going to make it so all the physical damage they take while they are frozen shreds your armor. So this is just free armor shred on a single target. This effectively means whenever you proc Arctic Howl while they are on 70% freeze build up or higher, they're going to be insta frozen, and then their armor is going to basically disintegrate. And then if you have a 6th link, you're going to throw in Exposing Cry, which would apply exposure to the enemies, which reduces their cold res. You drop this in the high budget, but something to note. Then we also use Skeletal Clerics. These guys are just here to heal our minions. We're going to support them with everything that we can to increase their levels, because that's the easiest way to scale their heal over time, giving them more levels. And then you're going to make them tankier so they don't die as often. And then Eternal Rage. Eternal Rage is the spirit gem. It costs 100 spirit to reserve, so you won't be using it while you're in campaign, but you eventually have the gear to use it. This gem is going to make it so we regen 5 rage every second at level 20, or at level 20 quality, it's going to be 5.5 rage every second. It's a lot of rage per second, and it ultimately means we never lose rage naturally. We never decay rage. So that means we can take a node like Anger Management, which increases, it makes rage loss start faster. But because we never experience rage loss, it just doesn't matter. So it's just 15 free max rage. Now, alternatively, if you were to go the Sceptre version, you're going to have to use your Arctic Howl as a big source of rage generation with, I think it's called Raging Cry, which is a support gem that makes war cries generate 4 rage per power of enemies in range. And if you do not want to lose rage while you are actively not around enemies, you might have to path into a war cry node that gives you minimum power. This node right here, Roaring Cries, makes it so your war cries have a minimum of 10 power, which makes it so you can always generate rage with your war cry. Do I recommend this route, no, like I said, because Sceptre, I would much recommend the Eternal Rage, but that is the alternative choice you have for if you really want to scale those Sceptre stats, essentially. Now for the item section, we're going to be using a talisman, like I said earlier. This is just an example of what a GG talisman looks like. This is not actually what you're going for. Your priority here is level of all melee skills for your that +7 to pounds. You're also going for leech mana, like I mentioned earlier, for your lunar blessing to leech a lot of mana to you, and then you're just going for as much physical damage, like elemental damage or whatever else you can get on your talisman as you can as a prefix. And you're going to want this on a magi or magi talisman for the maximum rage, allowing you to better sustain your ultimate and also give you more minion attack cast speed, because this is the and minion damage, because this is the biggest reason why we are going rage scaling. By going rage scaling, you want to have this number as high as possible so you get the maximum bonus of for minion attack speed and minion damage, while also actively using rage whenever lunar blessing is off cooldown to extend its duration. So that is the reason why we go rage on lunar blessing as well as the lunar assault. This is because whilst eternal rage can sustain your rage for lunar blessing purposes, you want it to be you want to get to max rage as fast as possible so that you get maximum benefits for as long as possible before you have to eat it with lunar blessing and then repeat. So this is why we still scale rage on hit on our gems and everything. And if you're wondering where our sources of max rage are coming from, it is coming from here, because we get max rage while we are shapeshifted. That is coming from here, big max rage nodes right here, and I think we get like 4 max rage coming from here. So we get a decent chunk of rage coming from our tree, essentially. So back to items, like I said earlier, we're going to want to scale melee skills as well as minion skills. Minion skills affects both pounce and wolf pack. So in any spots that can have minion and melee skills, you're going to want to have minion instead of melee. So the biggest example is amulet. Amulet can have level of minion or level of melee. You're always going to go for minion over melee because it will affect pounce and wolf pack versus just only affecting pounce. So for our helmet, priority stat is level of all minion skills. That is priority. You typically want to have it on an armor base, but if you can't find it or you find it on a hybrid, that's fine too. Then your primary stats are going to be life and then mana, and then you fill your suffixes with resistances. Your chest piece, you're going to look for spirit, and then you're going to look for as much life as you can get, and then fill your suffixes with as good of stats as possible, attributes, resistances, all that. Gloves, level of all melee skills is priority, then life, then mana, and then resistances. Mana is not even that priority here, honestly. It's just nice to have. Resistances take priority over mana. Boots is movement speed, life, resistances, mana, in that order. Amulet is minion skills. If you can afford spirit, go for it. If you can't, just get your level of minion skills and then get other good stats. Eventually you want to upgrade to a level of minion skills and spirit. And this is the one slot where you're likely not to get like really good stats unless you're willing to spend an amount. So your priority here is just +2 level of minion or higher, and then as much spirit as you can fit with that, and then anything else you get with that is bonus. Your rings are going to be life, mana, and then resistances, attributes. Same with the other ring, and then your belt is life, mana, armor, and then resistances, attributes, all that good stuff. Now the base, you want to get as much armor as possible. So obviously, if you can get armor base, that's better. But if you're on the budget, that doesn't, then you don't have the choice. For our charm slots, we are opting for anti-freeze. I will add the charm slots by the time this video goes live. We're going for anti-freeze, and then the other two are up to you what you get. Anti-bleed is always a good choice. Anti-ignites, because ignites are very, very problematic right now. I think they're kind of overtuned for enemies. So anti-ignite is a good choice. Anti-poison is also really good depending on the content you're doing. And if you're not capped on chaos risk, then it's probably very good for it to go amethyst charm to give you that extra bit of chaos risk you might need to cap it. In our flask, we're going to be ultimately going for grants life recovery to minions on our life flask. This makes it so they get some extra life regen, increases their overall sustain as you drink your potion, makes it so that they die less and just feels better. And then for your mana flask, you just want a mana flask with as much recharge as possible. You don't care as much if it removes from your life or not. I would personally go for one that doesn't, but it's still really good in terms of mana recovery. Well, that is basically it. And then we have our gems. These gems, priority goes to damage taken from mana before life, so it has to be a sapphire. And then you just want minion resistances, either early res or chaos res, but those are your 2 priority stats, and they shouldn't be expensive. So that pretty much covers the core of the low budget. And like I said earlier, the high budget is very similar to the low budget, but for the high budget, we have actually fit in the Sceptre. So I'm going to be going over a few ways you can try to force fit the Sceptre into your build, so you can pick up like Lord of the Wilds and not throw your Eternal Rage. So this kind of threw me off, but the reason why this Reserve Spirit is here in the negatives is because PoB has a bug where the Sceptre keeps getting unequipped for some reason. I don't know why, but it's basically just a bug, and eventually to be fixed. So if you notice like the Spirit is missing or whatever, or fire resistant capped, just put in the Sceptre and it should be good. Anyways, so we're going to talk about ways to fit in this notable or this keystone into the build. The first and biggest way and the easiest way we could do this is by stacking jewel sockets and then going for a Grand Spectrum Emerald gem. This gives you 2% increased spirit per Grand Spectrum, and if you have all 3 of them, this is an expensive upgrade, by the way. Well, it's an expensive temporary upgrade. If you have 3 of them, that gives you 6% per, so 18% increase for all 3, which is a lot of increased spirit because that's multiplicative with just Sceptre. And I just said this, but this has already dropped the Sceptre. It's so annoying. Anyways, so that is option 1. You do that, you are a lot closer to it, and then you just need to fit in 1 or 2 of these reservation efficiencies. I recommend chess piece because it's the largest roll. If you can get 12%, you're a good chunk of the way there. Maybe you'll have to fit in either on the Great Helm or the Talisman, but you might just want to look out for extra spirit reservation. But with the full 3 of them, you should be fine. Another way to go about it is by getting an early Dialas. If you get an early Dialas Desire and you cannot fit it while it's in Wolfpack, consider putting that Desire in Eternal Rage. That would help a lot with the reservation, and that will make it so you can use your Sceptre now. Then the last way would be to fit in reservation on all 3 pieces. So Talisman, Helmet, and Body Armor, whilst also getting flat spirit on your Talisman. Those are the ways you would go about it. And of course, you would want spirit, increase as much spirit as you can from your Shrine Sceptre. I think you typically want to have over like 180 spirit plus, and you would ideally want to use your sockets for either spirit or increased damage. If you can get by without increased spirit, then of course there are better runes to use in your Sceptre. But if not, then you go for increased spirit. That is the biggest change here. And of course, because it is high budget, where the bulk of your currency spending is going to be going into stuff like lineage supports. Things like Rakata's Law are really strong damage boosts, but are also very expensive. I think right now it's like 27 divines, very expensive. So this is really high budget. But being able to use a Rakata's Flow essentially means we no longer want to use exposure. We just want to want them to have as much res as possible, so that our minions can invert it and then do giga damage for it. And I think the optimal way to take advantage of Rakata's Flow is to have the second minion type, i.e. if you're using pounds for Rakiatas, you're going to use Wolfpack to have a lot of physical damage. So you're going to be doing physical damage shred, you're going to be doing Feeding Frenzy, but the idea here is you want to use Impale. You want to store that minion's attack so that it can help the other minion do a lot more damage, which when multiplied by the damage's extra code and then gets inverted is a lot of extra damage for that one minion. So if you effectively turn Wolfpack into a damage dealing hybrid physical code minion, but then by doing that, it is also supporting your Pounce Wolves. And when you get really high up there in investment and your spirit is really fine, then you can switch them and use your Pounce Wolves as a physical option and then your Wolfpack will then be your Rakata's Flow minions. And the idea here is Pounce gets to level 40 very easily. This isn't fixed, huh? Pounce gets to level 40 very easily. And give me a second. Okay, it is fixed. I thought I didn't have level of all melee skills on my gloves. I do. I think it's just because I moved around support gems. But anyways, Pounce gets to level 39, 30, 40 very easily. And that means it has really good base physical damage because of those levels. So that means if you were to give it physical damage with Impale, that means it will store an even bigger Impale hit. And that means Wolfpack gets to benefit a whole lot more from it. And the only reason you would use this setup is because Wolfpack is more reliable on single target. So if it foolproofs your minions from being wiped and you losing a lot of your damage, or you're going to lose a decent chunk of your damage anyways, but it makes it so you lose less of your damage because the minions that will automatically revive are the ones that invert the resistances. So keep that in mind. You can switch to Wolfpack gems and Pounce gems, support gems as you see fit, but this is generally the structure you want between the two of them on the high budget. And then Lunar Blessing basically is still the same setup. Our Lunar Assault, I need to fill this up. I didn't realize it wasn't filled. I'll fill that up in a bit. Arctic Howl, everything now is on 6 links. So we're going to be using Deep Freeze, so our freeze from primed enemies lasts longer. And so we have longer in the shred window. Actually, no, we don't shred anymore with this skill. And so we last longer while the enemy is just frozen in general, which just feels better and allows us to deal more damage and feel safer being up close to the enemy without getting one shot, because PoE bosses are balanced that way. Then Eternal Rage, Clerics. Now with Clerics, you're going to be, your main focus here is giving them as many levels as possible. So you want them to have Brutus's Brain so they cannot die. This doesn't affect their healing because that's what they're here for. They're here to heal. So they can't take damage, they can't deal damage. Then you want to have them have as many levels as possible. So Minion Mastery. And they are going Utrecht's Augury, which allows you to have 2 other support gems, but still gives it +3 to levels. Very, very good setup, but very, very expensive. That's in mind. And then the last thing to note is what is in my notes section. You're going to want to use Purity Scepters as your scepters. So Purity of Fire, Purity of Cold, Purity of Lightning. Why you do this is for the Purity Scepter specifically, they've had a box in 0.1 where if you put in aura support gems, instead of the support gems to increase the spirit reservation of the aura, they just don't do anything. So we get to run these support gems for free. Upwelling gives 50% increased minion damage while you're not on full mana. Vitality is 2% life regen per second. Clarity is mana regen. Herbalism is increased life recovery from flask. Very, very good support gems, and I have them set up in the config section of my PoB because I can't put them in the skill section, because that in PoB it's not bugged, but in game it is. So we have it here, and we have a lot of other configs here, as you would see, but these are just things that are not currently working. For example, Lord of the Wilds doesn't have support for the last line, which is 50% less reservation efficiency, so we are making up for it here. Then we also do not have, the PoB has no way of saying you are currently shapeshifted. So nodes like this just don't do anything because it doesn't know you're not shapeshifted. Or at least as of when I put it, it didn't. Does it know it now? I don't know, but it removed my scepter, so I don't think it does in any case. So that's why these nodes are here. Rage scaling, PoB doesn't have support for it. Bataires also doesn't have support for it. Lunar Blessing surprisingly doesn't have support for it, so that is also there. Predator's Mark, also no support, but we have enough minions to always get the max bonus, so it's here. Pack Encouragement, no support for it there. So that is why our config looks the way it is. I believe that about covers all the things that change in the high budgets. Your tree kind of changes a bit maybe, but you can always just compare and contrast to see exactly what changes. I know we now use it from nothing with Necromantic Talisman that allows us to pick up Gigantic Following for free, Recoup, Max Life, and Threshold, and Church doesn't matter. recoup, as well as minion recoup, as well as skip this node and pick up damage taken while also picking up recoup. So some so those are pretty good buffs, as well as having +3 Prism of Belief. So we have 3 extra levels on the wolf pack, which gets them to level 35. And yeah, like aside all of these things I mentioned, that covers the changes, I think. Now overall, I've had a lot of fun playing the build, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll be sure to answer them. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps out a lot with the algorithm. And with all that said, thank you for watching.